Hey, what's up, y'all? Back at it once again. This is Koski of Fun Day, doing it for you and for yours. Gotta say, shout out to y'all, you know what I'm saying, for watching and, doing what's up with the videos and whatnot. Channel been booming. And I was gonna be booming some more, you know what I'm saying? And gotta give a big shout out to my ancestors, for bringing me this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding and driving me and lacing me with this game. The more I read, the more I study, the more I meditate, the more I pray, the more I fast and things of that nature, the more things be coming to me. You know what I'm saying? I just get out here and I gotta share. You feel me? So here's one I had to share. You know what I'm saying? It's from the International Journals of Humanity and Social Science, Volume 2, number 22. It's come from November 2012. Black Capitalism, an economic program for the Black Ghetto. This is by Ryan Berry, adjunct professor lecturer at Merrimack College. You know what I'm saying? That's in Boston, Massachusetts. The abstract. The American federal government supported the creation and expansion of economically depressed urban residential areas where blacks live and segregated from whites. These ghettos face barriers to economic development, including high unemployment, low-wage labor market, capital drain, and market dualism. Three ghetto economic development strategies are ghetto dispersal, corporate branch planning, and black capitalism. Black capitalism break the ghetto economic barrier better than ghetto dispersal and corporate branch planning. But it will only be possible with significant support from whites and the federal government. So, it kind of says for itself that, black capitalism will only be supportive or can only work with significant support from whites and the federal government. That means it ain't going to work. All right, let's see. Why do ghettos have bad economy, and what is the best way to fix them? This paper offers a partial answer. Let's see. Let's see what this talks about. Number one, the ghetto. The ghetto refers to different things. It may refer to a poor residential area, or it may refer to a poor racially homogeneous residential area. But most often, and at least in America, the word refers primarily to blacks, economically depressed urban residential area in which blacks are segregated from whites. There are a lot of these in America, and they are ghettos. I am concerned this thing right here. The creation of the ghetto. The ghetto is relatively recent and historical phenomenon. In 1870, I check this stat right here. In 1870, 80% of black Americans lived as sharecroppers in the rural South. But by 1970, 80% of black Americans lived in urban areas outside the South. All right? Between 1910 and 1970, millions of blacks moved from the South to the Northeast, Midwest, and West. Causes of this great migration include the expansion of northern industrialization in response to the outbreak of World War I, increasing labor demands in northern factories, and blacks seeking refuge from the exploited sharecropping, the southern sharecropping system, among others. The stat that give me, though, just think about it. 100 years ago, 1870, not over 100 years ago, 80% of blacks lived in the sharecropper rural South. But by 1970, 80% of blacks lived in urban areas outside of the South. So we just traded the one plantation, a rural plantation, for an urban plantation. You understand? That was by happenstance. That wasn't by accident. That was, that was done by the government. Let's see. Working class northern whites fear economic competition from black migrants. Northern factories employ black migrants as strike bearers, which earn blacks the antipathy of white employees. Most unions excluded blacks. Newspaper increasingly use the term as nigger and darky. 5 urban race riots broke up between 1900 and 1920. Whites used violence to intimidate and to force blacks out of areas into darky towns and black belts. The level of urban segregation between blacks and whites began to rise at the turn of the century and will last for over 60 years. Between 1930 and 1960, the federal government supported suburban growth by providing greater tax savings for businesses located to the suburbs than those staying in the city. A government mortgage called the Federal Housing Authority, I did a video on this. I'm gonna put it on in the inbox of this. You know what I'm saying? As I said before, this is the U.S. government pushing this. Facilitated new home ownership by accepting small down payments. While policies like these enable 35 million families to participate in homeowner equity accumulation, they constrain Black Americans to residential opportunities to the cities and deny them access to wealth-generating suburb tract homes. To preserve the neighborhood stability, the FHA openly recommended the use of restrictive covenants, contractual agreements among property owners, binding themselves and their heirs to exclude Blacks from owning, occupying, or leasing their property. So when they did this to preserve neighborhood stability, you know what I'm saying, these restricted covenants, you know what I'm saying, it did not just affect one generation, it affected generations down the line. You know what I'm saying? Because in the dance, you cannot sell to Black people. Neighborhood Improvement Association kept Blacks out of the suburbs by threatening to boycott real estate agents who sold suburban homes to Blacks. By the late 60s, white flight was complete, and virtually all American cities with significant Black populations had to come to house large and extremely segregated, impoverished ghettos. Despite the Fair Housing Act and various economic development programs, the ghetto still persists today because the U.S. government is still perpetuating these policies. 2, the modern barriers to economic development. Today, ghetto residents are faced with severe economic hardships. Nearly 1 out of 3 Blacks live in poverty compared with fewer than 1 out of 10 whites. And 43% of all Black children live in officially poor households in 1986. In 2010, the Black unemployment rate was 16%, the highest unemployment rate among a major race and ethnic groups, and twice that of whites. Also in 2010, Black youth have become more than twice the jobless rate of white youth. Most residents are low-wage workers. Median income show that Blacks only earn 55% of the amount made of whites. You know, it's about 60% now. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, from 2012 to 2019, you got a 5% bump. Residents are largely in low-paying retail or personal service jobs. Some ghetto residents work several odd jobs to make ends meet. Colombian sociologist Sharon Alaveston spent over a decade amidst a 10-block Marquise Park ghetto in the Chicago South Side. We met Marquise Park residents Oceana, who said her neighbors are unlicensed hairstylists, there's a lot of those in the Black neighborhood, ad hoc caterers, you know, people that serve her barbecue chicken and stuff like that. They got their own little chicken things, you know, barbecue on the corner. Tailors, psychics, gypsy cab drivers, y'all call them Ubers today, janitors, and mechanics. I mean, where would we be without the mechanic? Residents of the Marquise Park sell clothes, bootleg movies, pirate movies, and used kitchen supply they call ghetto wear. Some make a quick buck by taking over abandoning buildings and offering special shelters. Others make monies with promise to keep the police patrols away from the same space. Relatively few residents own their own business, but when they do, they tend to own retail establishments or personal service enterprises like barbershops, beauty shops, and convenience stores. Running a business in the ghetto is generally expensive. Crime, shoplifting, and vandalism increase the cost of insurance and security. Accordingly, some businesses are run illegally because their owners cannot afford to adhere to government regulations or report all taxable income. Some business owners in Marquise Park engage in illegal practices to make ends meet. They rent their property after hours to prostitutes, gamblers, and hairstylists. Listen to challenges of running an off-the-books car repair services. Marquise Park residents James Alexander first cites the police. First, you're doing something illegal, which means the police must be involved. We have to deal with them, or you can either hide from them or pay them. So the police have been paid off this racket too. Numerous residents have a hard time borrowing money. Residents are forced to borrow from friends because of financial institutions emphasize the experience of management, which many residents do not have. Samuel Wilson, who runs the daycare in Chicago, says, it's a small group of us that are really helping each other. It's what you do in the inner city. You can't lose that. Who are we going to trust next? The drain of capital. Those residents were able to borrow money to do so from high-interest lenders, including loan sharks. These lender investment policies draw funds out of the ghetto into non-residential business loans and mortgages. White non-resident slumlords take money from residents and spend it elsewhere. Many residents choose to spend their money outside the ghetto where prices are low because it's cheaper to do business. Many ghettos operate under severe trade deficits. A trade deficit is an economic condition that occurs when a monetary value of the import exceeds the monetary value of the exports. The imports of the commodity by service brought into the ghetto for sale within the ghetto. The exports of goods or services produced in the ghetto is the outside of the ghetto. Primarily, the primary export of the ghetto is cheap, unskilled labor. The ghetto imports few manufactured goods, probably because the ghetto is not well suited for many forms of manufacturing. Businesses prefer to locate facilities in open countryside where the land can be cheaper than neighborhoods. Manufacturing facility requires large open spaces, which ghettos generally do not have. Congested streets and few parking spaces make it difficult and expensive for delivery trucks to access the ghetto. And converting the ghetto to an industrial center will require dislocating the entire residential population. Market dualism. Economists divide the few businesses that are located in the ghetto into more profitable lending sector composed of white businesses and a less profitable lagging sector composed of black businesses. Their difference to dual marketism. Economics causes foreign to dual marketism. Many sales in the white sector are guaranteed by government contracts, like defense and all that stuff like that. So the white sector can afford to make chancy investments, raise prices, and invest in physical and human capital. Business capability capable of making investments are generally more profitable than a business with little investment capital. Higher profits allow the white sector to produce higher quality goods and services, hire more workers, and pay non-poverty wages. Workers in the white sector are generally more educated and more trained than the workers in the black sector. Because workers high value wage jobs and employers are trained to value to train worker, white sector businesses generally have a low turnover. Job stability attracts investors who can increase profits of the white business sector. Businesses in the overcrowded black sector, however, cannot purchase startup equipment, raw materials, because they don't have adequate access to capital. And many black sector businesses are usually part of the white franchise chains. Even if blacks own small franchise businesses, a substantial portion of the profit ends up in white hands. For example, it's more than likely that half of the sales of the volume of Harlem retail and service network is ultimately in the hands of whites. The black sector workers are limited by a few types of low-wage jobs and do not require training because the scarcity of the government running training programs leave workers largely uneducated. In Harlem, for example, the employment opportunities in the black sector are limited mostly to barbershops, dry cleaners, small restaurants and bars. And lack of government training programs result in an urban fiscal crisis in which the worker cannot move from the black sector to the white sector without requiring educational credentials, and workers in the black sector cannot require educational credentials because they cannot afford them. So it becomes a trap, big trap, the original trap. The government efforts to increase secure sector mobility have failed, and many have established economic development institutions train black workers for low-wage labor, instead of teaching them how to start a business of their own and providing them with investment capital. Let me read this to you again. Government efforts to increase sector mobility has failed. Many of the established economic development institutions train black sector workers for low-wage jobs, instead of teaching them how to start a business of their own or providing them with investment capital. So when you hear people say that we need jobs, all the government going to do is teach the black worker how to work a low-wage job, instead of teaching them how to start their own business. Or give me the capital that's needed. Race and class discrimination are amongst the biggest contributor to the sector of immobility. Business owners in the white sector are simply unwilling to hire workers from the black sector. 3. Economic development strategies. The discussion of the ghetto economic development strategies have become increasingly popular in the academic literature of the 1970s and then kind of stopped. Economic ghetto development refers to the action of the policymakers to promote a standard of living and the economic health of the ghetto. Today, 3 of the most widely cited ghetto economic development strategies are ghetto dispersal, corporate branch planning, and black capitalism. Now, we're going to talk about the best of the 3 in this one, which the writer of this says is black capitalism. Ghetto dispersal is an unwise strategy. Advocates of ghetto dispersal encourage residents to leave the ghetto to access better educational facilities, housing, and employment. Some dispersal advocates feel that the government should increase information about suburban jobs and link training programs with suburban jobs. Dispersal will be an unwise economic development strategy primarily because it will not be an economic development strategy. Abandoning the ghettos would eliminate, not improve the economies of the ghettos, but leave behind vast swaths of abandoned and deteriorating residential property. Dispersal advocates seem to assume that it would be too expensive or impossible to economically revitalize historically and culturally relevant space. But more importantly, dispersal is not feasible. Many residents will not want to leave their ghetto because their families have lived there for generations, right? Because they was locked into these lands through the land covenants. You know what I'm saying? When we talked about earlier in the paper, land covenants got them locked in there. So, they felt like they've been there for 3-4 generations. And since ghetto residents feel the effect of racism every day, they might not want to live in the white communities or work in white businesses. Black political leaders may be unlikely to favor a policy that disperses geographically concentrated groups of supporters. Widely dispersed interest groups are generally less politically influential. Even if the dispersal would make the ghetto smaller, it will actually intensify the barriers to economic employment. Only those residents who could afford to pay moving costs would leave. In this sense, the ghetto dispersal will leave behind the poorest of the poor. Dispersal will contribute to the drain of capital because disbursement residents will not spend their money in the ghetto. Finally, sending trained residents to the suburbs will increase the proportion of untrained workers in the ghetto labor supply. This will further discourage businesses from setting up facilities and contributing to the ghetto's trade deficit. Corporate branch planning is unwise. Corporate branch planning is the government providing subsidies and tax breaks for white business owners to construct and maintain businesses in the ghetto. At first glance, corporate branch planning seems an attractive solution to the ghetto barriers of economic development. Proponents of corporate branch planning argue that the well-placed and established white business within the ghetto will force income flow through the ghetto and encourage small businesses growth and encourage employment opportunities and enable the ghetto to reduce expensive exports and serve as a model for other business so they may meet the requirements. However, corporate branch planning will not necessarily meet these expectations. Corporate branch is an undesirable development strategy for 4 reasons. Number 1, white business owners will not want to participate. Development economics will find trouble finding white business owners who will be willing to participate in the program. This program has been obvious since the branch planning inception. In 1967, Robert Kennedy introduced the Kennedy Plan for the first legislation of subsidizing white corporate branch planning in the ghetto. Kennedy went to great lengths and spent a lot of money to find whites that are willing to plant branches in the ghetto. He gave speeches at the Chamber of Commerce and negotiated with several real estate boards and organized private dinner parties and got support from Republicans like Douglas Dilton and Henry Ford II. However, most companies did not respond to Kennedy's proposal. White business owners felt they couldn't directly deal with black militants and feared that the climate of violence within the ghetto would deter most white employees from working there. Union execs feared that there was no profit in the community development for them. One company president told Kennedy, "Senator, The afternoon I walked into my board of directors and telling them that Bobby Kennedy was here and he didn't should put a plant in the Bedford-Stuyvesant, that's the afternoon they had me committed. Since 1960, white business owners have not shown strong support for corporate branch planning. Why? On one hand, business owners today are generally more aware of corporate social responsibility importance, not to mention business benefits. So they probably are not worried about the board member directors and committing them to branch planning. And in the decline of the Black Power movement in the 1980s, probably mean Black militants presented with modern white business owners with the less of a threat if Black meetings even posed a threat to begin with, which they probably didn't. But on the other hand, it is empirically variable that the branch planning could be extremely risky and undertaking, even with a sizable government subsidy. Most planted branch under the Kennedy plan failed due to excessive congestion and lack of public services. Studies estimate firms drawing their labor forces from the ghetto would have a 7.5% lower productivity and 50% higher labor turnover, twice the hiring costs and 8 times the direct training costs as firms are using non-residential labor. Also, property in the urban area could be expensive. Moreover, white businessmen are generally aware that the businesses are more profitable when surrounded by other businesses. As it stands, there are generally few businesses in the ghetto. Corporate branch planning places the community control in the hands of whites. There is no reason to assume that placing a white branch in the Black ghetto will reduce white discrimination against Blacks, which is perhaps the most fundamental causes of the ghetto's economic barriers. In fact, branch planning will probably only increase racial tensions between Blacks and whites. Corporate branch planning would place control of the ghetto in the hands of wealthy whites outside of the ghetto. Politicians and businessmen like Kennedy, Denlin, and Henry Ford II were partnering with wealthy business people to decide what kind of business are planning and where to plant them. Many Black economists will see white branch planning as a form of colonialism, which it would be, because it would be a form of colonialism. Because of the ghetto's social isolation, chances that the wealthy white politicians and business people have spent even a single day there are low. Residents are seen better to equipped to make the decisions about the community, having grown up, lived, and worked there. Residents are probably more familiar with the community's economic needs and barriers to employment. Whites outside the community can select projects that benefit whites outside the community, not projects that benefit the residents. Most dangerously, residents lost control over their community could inspire animosity towards white politicians and businessmen, which would happen. Number 3, corporate branch planning will provide mainly low-wage job opportunities for residents. Because we're dealing with the Black community being a colony now. You know what I'm saying? So that's basically what it is after you're telling this. In the past, regular wages and planted branches stayed low because white unions were unwilling to fight for them. Many residents are untrained, unskilled, and possess little work experience. Paying unskilled and untrained workers high wages will be atypical business practice and dangerous for business owners considering that planted branches tend to fail. Indeed, the successful planted branches tend to be those that are paid the lowest wages and produce the cheap, substandard products. Substandardized products, Most importantly, corporate branch planning will flat out ignore the fundamental economic problem of the lack of Black business ownership because of the increased number of white-owned businesses. Number 4, corporate branch planning would ignore market dualism. Proponents of corporate branch planning claim their policy will force money to flow through the ghetto economically. A more desirable but much more difficult claim is that corporate branch planning will force money to flow through the Black sector of the ghetto economy. Not all corporations will overcome the strong temptation to plant branches in the white sector. After all, the turnover in the white sector is lower, and workers in the white sector are more educated. Now, assuming branches will be planted in the Black sector and branches planted will survive, A significant portion of the branch's profit could end up in the hands of white branch owners. Even if the residents spend their low-wage earnings in the black sector, white non-resident branch owners are more than likely to spend their real profits outside of the ghetto and contribute to the capital drain. Perhaps planted branches will increase surrounding property values. This is a good thing, unless property values become so high that only white non-residents can afford to purchase the land. White businesses and residents could spring up around the planted branches. This would divide the ghetto's economy along racial lines, detracting black businesses' profits and causing the black sector to lag even more. Black capitalism. Black capitalism is a political movement that encouraged black ownerships as a means of production. Black capitalists propose state and federal governments provide the following economic solutions for blacks in blacks' businesses exclusively: wage subsidies for workers, guaranteed purchase of manufactured goods, tax incentives, lower interest rate on loans, guaranteed loans, subsidized supplies for technical machinery, subsidized entrepreneur educational services, community development corporations to help blacks start businesses, and guaranteed insurance rates. Number one, black capitalism will be better for the ghetto as an economic development strategy than branch planning or dispersal. Black capitalism is a place-oriented and a person-oriented strategy. To explain, a place-oriented development strategy and a primary objective is to improve the particular location of the economy. A person-oriented development strategy is the primary objective to improve the economic well-being of individuals. You know, this kind of, I'm going to take a sidebar on this one right quick. You know, if we mess with the community as a group, as a collective, it should be a collective thing. You know what I'm saying? Don't break it down to the individual, you know? Ghetto dispersal is merely a person-oriented strategy because it will encourage residents to seek out economic well-being at the expense of the ghetto's economic prosperity. Corporate branch planning is merely a place-oriented strategy because it's proposed to seek out the spur growth of the ghetto business by placing successful white business-owned businesses there. Black capitalism, however, is both a place and a person-oriented strategy. Black capitalism is a person-oriented strategy because an individualized entrepreneur education and the black ownership of the ghetto businesses will improve individual blacks' economic welfare, not the collective, all right, but individual blacks' welfare. So it makes you a target in the black neighborhood, basically. Black capitalism is a place-oriented strategy because improving black businesses in the ghetto will create multiplier effects. For example, when a store owner repairs the face of his or her businesses, neighboring businesses might feel pressure and encourage to do the same. Black capital is both place and person-oriented strategy because its capable black leaders will be more than likely to lend their talents to the betterment of the ghetto when they're employed inside of the ghetto. Black capitalism addressed the problem of market dualism better than ghetto dispersal or corporate black planning. Or if the government were able to provide the black sector with wage subsidies, its workers may value their jobs more and turnovers may decrease. But what turnover will make the black sector more attractive to investors? Lower interest rate and government-backed loans for black businesses may provide blacks with access to capital. Access to capital is to reduce barriers to entry to overcrowded black sector. Educational programs for the black sector could result in more white sector businesses hiring black sector workers, alleviating the urban financial crisis and increasing sector mobility. Black access capital, coupled with the subsidizing of entrepreneurial training services, would allow more residents to start their own potential successful businesses in the ghetto. With a sizable government subsidy, ghetto residents could even build manufacturing plants. If ghetto residents would export enough manufacturing goods, both the drain of capital and the trade deficit would decrease. Black capitalism will empower blacks to eliminate the ghetto barrier to the economic development. Corporate branch planning would require blacks to look to whites for help. That right there off rip. White Jesus complex. The ghetto dispersal will require blacks to abandon their homes and community for white communities. But black capitalism will not do either of these. Rather, it will empower residents to make their own financial decisions and recapture their community by providing them with jobs, self-respect, and economic heroes. Assuming Black politicians will be more than likely to pay attention to people with money than people without money. Let me read this again. Assuming politicians will be more than likely to pay attention to people with money than people without money, the Black capitalist economic empowerment can lead to greater Black political empowerment, another potential vehicle of eliminating the ghetto's economic barriers. Black capitalists will be more likely to eliminate the ghetto economic barriers than corporate branch planning or ghetto dispersal. Corporate branch planning seems to sustain the ghetto's low-wage labor market if white unions are unwilling to fight for higher wages for Black workers. Ghetto dispersal will leave behind the poorest of the poor and perpetuate the ghetto's economic isolation from the rest of the economy. However, providing residents with access to capital may reduce their dependency on low-wage labor market. Black capitalism, if succeeded and well-funded, will create an economic domino effect. Successful Black businesses would inspire other Blacks to become business people. 3. The argument against Black capitalism are unpersuasive. Some economists will point out to the Black entrepreneur that the entrepreneur composes a very small portion of the population. They will say that becoming a wage earner will not be much quicker than the path to cash. This argument mischaracterizes Black capitalism. Black capital is not a cash now program. Black capital is a long-term solution for a very long-term problem. It took at least a half a century to create the ghetto, but it may take even longer to eliminate the barriers in economic development. Some will oppose Black capitalism on economic grounds and argue that it would encourage segregation. I will grant them that Black capitalism does not directly address segregation. Indeed, Black capitalism grew out of a separatist movement of improving the well-being of Blacks and required Blacks to develop their own economy, largely without the help of whites. However, it does not follow that Black capitalism is immoral. The Black economy is already segregated. So policymakers should not be afraid to fight fire with fire and apply a segregationist solution to the problem of segregation. These opponents also know that Black capitalism is a long-term solution. Creating a separate Black economy and the Black achievement of political power will be a means to eventual integration. Other opponents will argue that it would be unfair to provide government benefits on the basis of race alone. Black capitalists must reply to this argument that contains an untrue premise. Black capitalism will not provide benefits strictly on the basis of race alone because Black capitalism is a place-oriented movement. Black capitalism will not, for example, provide subsidies to a teeny minority of wealthy Blacks living in Boston back day. Now, even assuming Black capitalism will provide preferential treatment on the basis of race, the argument ignores the fact that preferential treatment is fair, and when the treated individual face an extreme disadvantage through no fault of their own, Blacks born and raised in the ghetto cannot help they were born into a life of economic disadvantage. For this reason, arguing that Black capitalism is unfair is like arguing educators acted unfairly when they accommodate students with learning disabilities. If the wealth gap between Black and white is the legacy of the government policies of slavery, Jim Crow, and policies that systematically favor whites, then the government has a responsibility to undo the wealth gap and should give Black enterprise attention. Other opponents will contend that Black capitalism is too expensive. Indeed, Black capitalism will not be possible without a massive federal investment, such as reparations. But this investment is morally and logically required. The federal government encouraged sovereignization with the subsidizing spending on the federal highway and water projects, waste treatment, defense spending, and mortgage insurance, and tax subsidies for homeowners. These policies help create the ghetto. Federal programs to improve city services and housing have only slightly offset the damaging effects of the suburban sprawl. Indeed, the national Back to the City movement has been almost entirely ineffective. 4. Requirements for success. Black capitalism will not be possible without significant support or white support, simply because most politicians and policies makers are white. But some whites may not support Black capitalism. Black capitalism will inevitably involve a significant wealth distribution on the basis of race. A difficult idea for many policymakers to swallow, even though it was okay for them when it was going the opposite direction. And some whites will assume that the more profitable black sector of the ghetto will mean the less profitable sector of the white sector of the ghetto, and that more blackness will leave white businesses with smaller piece of the economic pie. But these whites will be assuming that the ghetto economic development is a zero-sum game. Proponents of black capitalism must emphasize that economically prosperous ghettos are better for all Americans. It may be difficult to identify successful entrepreneurs to invest in since there are few blacks in the ghetto currently have entrepreneurial skills. Really. Really. So instead of providing training for low jobs, which many current programs do, black capitalist programs must institute mandatory entrepreneurial training as a prerequisite for government loans. Also, white policymakers must realize that the blessed black candidate may identify with militant movements. Recommendations and limitations. While black capitalism will be a better solution for the ghetto economic barriers than dispersal or branch planning, it is not certain to say certain forms of dispersal or branch planning will not enjoy success. Perhaps ghetto dispersal will be successful if the government funded the moving costs, which we know they're not. And perhaps corporate branch planning would be successful if the residents ran the program, which that's not going to happen. That's definitely not going to happen. Future work should address all of these. This paper was addressed to tell how much money the federal government must spend on black capitalism for it to be successful. Studies comparing the cost of black capitalism with the cost of expected returns to ghetto dispersal or corporate branch planning are required. Future studies are to consider how wealthy and how to be distributed under black capitalism. Most academic analysis of the ghetto economic is outdated and from the 70s. I'll read that again. Most academic analysis of the ghetto economy are outdated and from the 70s. The future must update these stories in the light of the changing ghetto. But most importantly, this paper did not adequately address how to convince whites to support black capitalism, since black capitalism requires a redistribution of wealth on the basis of race. This may prove a difficult task. Now, as you see, they're still trying to have us hanging on to that tit and whatnot, about black capitalism and whatnot. And this, what's going on right now, they're doing a gentrification of the neighborhood, which is kind of like dispersal, dropping the property value real low and kicking black folks out, you know what I'm saying? Then they move into white neighborhoods and rebuild them back up again, So it's still going on the same thing, what they're doing. Has nothing really been changing. Let me read this in for the record. For example, Booker T. Washington argued that whites will only accept blacks as equal after blacks became experienced in businesses of their own. Malcolm X argued we have to teach our people the importance of where to spend their dollars, which is true. Long live Malcolm X. Roy Ennis, a former chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality, argued for community control of ghetto institutions so that the schools in the ghetto purchase material strictly for black businesses, which, by the way, that never happened. All this stuff, even the gentrification stuff that's going on right now, where it's basically just ghetto dispersal in a negative way because you're not getting jobs in the suburbs. You know what I'm saying? You're just basically losing your house and you got to move to another ghetto area, which is going through the same thing. This is all plotting and plans and designs by the federal government because the federal government backs gentrification. You understand me? I see it every day in my neighborhood. The black capitalism thing, they're not trying to give people. All I hear about are job programs. I don't hear about starting black businesses or economic stuff like that, which is one of the keys to get up out of here. You know what I'm saying? But many of us don't know how to get the business or basically have the capital to start the business. You know what I'm saying? So that always brings us behind an 8 ball on that situation. Always and forever. So we got to wake up, y'all. You know what I'm saying? It's a trap. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't. The main thing I'm going to tell everybody is start getting together, you know what I'm saying, and loving each other. Like Malcolm X said, watch where you spend your dollar. You know what I'm saying? Make sure your dollar bounces you can at least try to bounce it about 9-10 times in the neighborhood. you know what I'm saying, off of each other, like the other people do, you know what I'm saying? And this is the things we got to do to combat that, you know, and it started with the love. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to let my neighborhood be destroyed by these people like that. Getting involved politically. If your political person, be it county commissioner, ward, or whatever like that, and you know there ain't nobody contributing to their campaign and nobody black is contributing to their campaign, you can find that nobody black is contributing to their campaign, more than likely they're a shield for the white people. You know, and you need to get rid of them. You understand? These are the things we need to focus on and get and look towards. Anyway, this is a Coach Gift Fun Day. Saying much love. Continue growing this channel. I'm gonna continue dropping knowledge like this. You know what I'm saying? And our community is worth fighting for. You know what I mean? We gotta stop fighting for these blocks that we don't own and try to own these blocks. We build these blocks. You know, make our community back in love again. You know what I'm saying? Fall back in love with each other again. All this stuff that's going on right about now, the gangs and the shooting, you know, the dope selling and stuff like that, which is a real entrepreneurial economic in most communities and stuff like that. It's because of the competition to get the money, that the little bit of money that is left in the black community. You know, so we gotta fight and try to get our heads up in the game. You know, we can do this legally. We done it before. The Ku Klux Klan, they would kill, the first people they would kill was the black businessman and woman. The first people they would lynch because they didn't want the competition. Now they got the federal government backing them, which they had all along in the first place. You know what I'm saying? When they took away the 40 acres and a mule and all that stuff like that. So we got to understand, we are a nation inside of a nation, and their job is to keep us broke and baggers. The main side about this, before I go, and this got to be discussed and really looked at, the main side about this, you know, and the main thing, if you get anything out of this paper, you know what I'm saying, it's this right here. Let me find it. Here you go, right. The creation of the ghetto. In 1870, 80% of black Americans lived as sharecroppers in the rural South, right? They had us in a plantation, working for low-wage labor. You know what I'm saying? But by 1970, 80% of blacks lived in urban areas outside of the South. You know what I'm saying? So we just traded one thing, a country ghetto for an urban ghetto. Now it's by design. That was by force. Keep us contained. You know what I'm saying? They don't want us roaming free. Truly free on our own. Anyway, as I said before, this is a Coach Gift Fun Day. Much love to you and yours, and subscribe to the channel. Peace.